Hello. So, she got it correctly. My name is Paul Verbeek-Mast, and I work as a developer at a startup called Confrere. Besides that, I also organize conferences, workshops, and meetups. So I just want to do some quick promotions about one of them, which is called Queer.js, which I'm one of the organizers of, and it's founded by Sarah Vieira. And Queer.js is a meetup for everyone, but the speakers are queer. And it exists to give a voice to everyone, but to make a safe space where everyone is welcome. And the first one is going to be in Berlin in just a few days, but it's going to be all over the world. At least that's our plan. We have something planning for Barcelona, and if you want to know more about that, just talk to me. And I'm myself trying to organize one in Amsterdam. So if you want to attend, just keep an eye on the website. So back to my talk. At Confrere, we create a video conferencing tool in the browser, which is currently aimed at one-on-one calls between doctors and patients. And we use WebRTC for it. And as you can imagine, working with WebRTC and trying to make it accessible as possible, while also having to make sure it works in all the browsers for those important doctor calls, is a pain with very obscure debugging. Luckily for you, you don't really have to go through that pain of knowing the cross-browser stuff, because that's what I'm going to talk about. But it's going to be a little bit of a helicopter view about the browser's DevTools. So I won't go into detail everything. Unless you don't want to have lunch, then I can just continue during the lunch. But first, let's go way back to the year 2000. It was the time of Internet Explorer and Netscape Navigator, the time of GeoCities and AngelFire, the time of story backgrounds and colorful websites. And during that time was when I made my first website. Well, I was 14, so it wasn't really a professional website. It was a site where I showed my love for Zelda for the Nintendo 64. Now, it's been offline, and I couldn't find it at archive.org, but there were many out there, and it looked a little bit something like this. So I made my website using FrontPage, which was a WYSIWYG HTML editor that you could make your website without coding, but you could look into the code and change it if you want. And when I was done with the website, I just added some under construction signs, because that's what we used to do, and then put it on the server. And in 2000, Internet Explorer 4 was the biggest browser, because they integrated it so thoroughly into Windows that it was almost impossible to get rid of it. The second largest browser was Netscape Navigator 4, but that was slowly losing ground. And it had the reason of, well, Internet Explorer being pre-installed on Windows, but also that developers were actually just developing a lot for one browser. They just put some best viewed in Netscape Navigator's button on the website, and they just didn't look at the others. So Internet Explorer had some bits in it that Netscape didn't have, and vice versa, which could cause a little bit of an issue. And one of the features that was introduced in Netscape Navigator was the layer element. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how that works, if I can find my mouse. So there it is. Oh, sorry. Let's see where my screens are. Now, nowhere to be found. Oh, wait. That is weird. Can I get that screen here as well, maybe? That's possible. Ah, perfect, thanks. So let's... So this, by the way, this is called oldweb.today, where you can go to any website you want in a very old browser, and then just go through date and time, and which normally is very fast, but as you know, with live demos, that doesn't always work, which is a bit of a shame, but anyway, I'm sorry about that. Anyway, what the layers did was you could add some JavaScript to this layer element, so you could move it around on the website. And you can also add content from other websites, which kind of sounds like an iframe with position absolute to it, as you can use JavaScript, which you would be absolutely correct about, which I am just going to do this a little bit. Because Netscape Navigator didn't support position absolute. And it didn't support iframes, because position absolute was CSS2, which Netscape Navigator didn't have, and iframes only came in Netscape Navigator 6. But then the layers were also a little bit broken in Netscape Navigator 4. Because whenever you would resize the browser, the whole element would just like break out of context. So instead of like a half-width layer, you would just have a quarter width or something like that. So every time you resized, you had to refresh the website. So, sorry. So what people found out the solution is just to resize the browser. Whenever you resize the browser, it would automatically refresh instead. But in the early 2000s, how would you figure out a problem like that? Because we didn't really have the proper developer tools. We also didn't really have the good debugging stuff or any extensions to browsers. So one of the things that you could do is just Google it, and hopefully you find an answer. But Google was still in beta in 2000. And you could ask your colleagues if you had any. But what I usually did was just open the source, because nothing was minified. You could just look in the source for websites that actually fixed it. So that was the main developer tool we had back then, is just the view source tab. Later on, websites became more complex and more JavaScript was added to the website, so we needed to have some better tools for the job. Venkman here was one of the first debugging tools. And Venkman worked in Netscape Navigator, and it was also included within early versions of Firefox. And as you can see here, you could step through the code, and you can pause it at specific points. Another cool tool was the view source chart, which was created by Jennifer Madden, and it gives you a visualization of the DOM structure and the hierarchy. It cleaned up the source code and some indentation, and it also had live editing in it. And these were two of the tools that were very popular at the time, and there was a lot of other tools as well. And then in 2005, Firebug came. And Firebug actually took all those tools, took some inspiration from it, and added all the tabs. Later on, Firebug was added to Chrome instead of just Firefox. And after that, browsers just improved their own developer tools until Firebug wasn't needed anymore. You actually cannot use it anymore with Firefox Quantum, which is a little bit sad, because I tried to screenshot something, but I couldn't. So this is where we are now. Great tools implemented right in the browser. And you can access it with easy shortcuts, and you can add extensions to those browser tools if you want. Now, I'm not going to be talking about those old browsers. For the rest of the talk, I'm just going to assume that you only support modern common browsers, because otherwise it's going to be a longer talk. So Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, Samsung Internet, and Safari for iOS. But I'm also just going to be talking about desktop browsers, because if you want to talk about mobile debugging, that's going to be another 30-minute talk. And then there's the case of Microsoft Edge. So right now, it's a completely different browser than from all the others. But the inside version is based on Chromium, and the dev tools are almost identical to Chrome's. I heard that can change pretty soon, because Chrome actually hired most of the good people from Edge hired most of the people from Chrome. So it can happen that the Microsoft dev tools are getting better. But right now, let's just assume that it's not going to get better, because it's Microsoft. Anyway, so when do you want to do cross-browser testing? Because JavaScript engines nowadays are very good with following the specs, you don't necessarily need to test in every browser. So I made a flowchart for myself, which I'm now going to share with you as well. So first of all, does the thing that you're working on change the DOM? So do you do some things with the HTML structure? Are you adding or changing attributes? Well, then you're going to need to test in all the browsers because the DOM is just different in the browsers. So do you mess with the CSS, or are you doing some animations, showing, hiding elements, stuff like that? Then yes, test it everywhere. Do you want to specifically test the performance for all those browsers? Well, all the browsers have different engines, so you want to also test them. And if you're doing some bleeding edge technologies, you probably know that it's not going to work everywhere, so just test it. If it's something else, then you can just focus on your favorite browser because it's probably going to be working exactly the same. So just before I show you the tools, before I'm going to talk more in depth about the tools, this one is the developer tools in Chrome. In Firefox, it looks very similar, as you might have noticed already. Safari is slightly different. If you have your MacBook in dark mode, they automatically change the color scheme. But you also need to go to like Preference, Advanced, and then Show Develop menu, and so otherwise you cannot really use it. So all the browsers have tabs that are very similar. They have some unique tabs, but those similar tabs are, I'm just going to go over them real quickly. So this is probably the most used tab, and one that you're also probably most familiar with, which is called Inspector in Firefox, with elements in Chrome or Safari, and you can check or manipulate HTML and CSS with it. The console is what you expect of it. You can run and see JavaScript and see errors, and it has some built-in variables and functions that you can use for debugging. In the performance or timelines tab, you can record everything the browser does to see how you can improve it. The network tab shows you Henri sometimes, but it also shows everything that was loaded on the page, when it was loaded, how long it took, and all the information about the requests and response. And then there's the storage and applications, which shows you everything the browser has saved internally. Chrome also shows the service workers here. And with Firefox, you have to go to About Debugging to see it. And I saw that they are planning to add service workers also to this tab in version 70. So that's going to be in like 2 versions. And then there's the memory tab, which shows you the memory the browser is using. This is how it looks in Firefox, and this is the default view in Chrome, which is slightly different, but they basically do the same thing. So these are the 6 basic tabs. And in detail, they're a lot different from each other, but I'm not going to go over all the tiny little differences. But I want to show you in which case I would use a certain browser for debugging, which is what I'm going to do now. So, sorry. My favorite browser is Firefox. It's what I use normally. Sorry. So one of the things that Firefox has, they have a tab here to the right. I also have like 3 different sections, which is pretty neat when you're doing HTML and CSS. So whenever I want to do HTML, CSS changes, I use Firefox because they have a lot of great tools built in. For example, if you want to change like the font here, the heading here, and you want to see like how different line heights and things like that look with this font, then you can go to this fonts tab over here, and then you can just change the size of it, which is the wrong, let's just pick this one. Change the size of it, which these tools. And you can also, if you don't want your 2.7 RAM, then you can just change it to pixels, and it will give you the exact pixel size as well. You can change the line height if you want, or letter spacing, and the weight of this. Below it, it also shows you all the fonts that are used on the page and where the font face actually is. Should I make this a little bit bigger, maybe? Let's see. And you can copy the URL of that specific font in case you want to download it or something. And all the changes that you do within Firefox are showed here in the Changes tab. Now, these are all the font changes that I just did. And you can copy all the changes and paste it into wherever you want it. Another thing that I use quite often is the Flexbox Inspector. This is something that Chrome also does not have. So if you click on Flex here, let me just make this background white. Not that, no. You can see here how the Flexbox looks, how all the elements are, and where the spacing is for those elements. Now, if you go into the layout here, you can see all the flex item properties of this specific element. Or you can go into the container, and you can see which flex items there are within that container and all the properties of this flex container. Now, if you make this flex grow 1 and just remove a little bit of text, then you can see here what the base size of this container would be if it just would be the content, and how much extra size the flex grow will give to that content. So this is apparently exactly the same, but so the basis would be, yeah, makes more sense. So the content would be like 46 pixels if you didn't have flex grow, which you can see if you remove it. But this is very powerful if you're trying to figure out why certain elements have a certain width or height within your flex container. They also have a grid, which I did prepare. Okay, so they also have a grid view. So if you click on, let me just pick this one first. So if you click on the grid toggle here, then it shows you all the grid lines. It shows you the grid area names, which I defined right here. And it also shows you the lines into infinitely. So if you want to see if they line up with any other elements on the side, you can do it like that. Now let me show you the other grid. And here you can also see that it has the grid gap in between. Now, I think grid can be better, but it's the first great step. So, which browser is this? Chrome, yes. So for Chrome, I love to use the console, because Chrome has a lot of console tricks in it. There's, let me just do it like this. So if you, by the way, if you press Escape on the Elements tab, then it toggles this console here on the bottom. That goes for almost all browsers. So you can just do like things like 1+1 in the console, and Chrome actually already shows you whatever is computed here in the bottom. What you can also do is you can do $1, for example. Is that the right one? $0, which shows you the element you have currently selected. You can also do just the $, which you might have remembered from jQuery and stuff like that, which is just an element selector. So if you do, you will get this container. $, will get you all the elements. Like if you do like $div, then you get a list of all the divs on the page. Now, these are all things that all the browsers actually have, but there are some things that Chrome only has, and now I'm just going to take my nose for a second, but it's not remembering my face anymore, so that's great. Never mind. So one of the things you can do with Chrome is there's an inspect function, where if you remember that you have an element somewhere called calls, but you don't really know where it is on the page, you can just do inspect calls, which is not what I wanted. Oh, wait, inspect, and then you can get the element calls. And then it selects it in the element selector as well. And then you can just scroll it into view if you want. Let me quickly try this again. Yes, there it is. Yes, that was it. So, well, another function that Chrome has built in is called monitor. With monitor, you can monitor the exact, you can monitor whatever changes happen to functions. So, say you have a function called sum, which you get A and B, return A plus B, which. So, and if you're gonna monitor, you can monitor this function called sum, and now it gives you a message whenever sum is being called with whatever arguments. So this is very useful if you wanna, if you have some functions that you want to know when it's being triggered, what the arguments are when it's triggered. So you can just know how many times something like that is also. How many times it's being called as well. But you can also do this for the elements. You can also do this for events. So yeah, so we have the calls element, and we want to do monitor events. Dollar underscore is, by the way, the last argument that was the last thing that was. I can show you. Dollar underscore is whatever was you got the last time. So monitor events. They can say like the calls, and now it's just monitoring whatever click event it's on that element. So console is pretty powerful. It does more than just your normal JavaScript and your errors and stuff like that. In Firefox, it also has some pretty printing of objects whenever you need that, and you can also, in Firefox, get into like iframes if you want to, but I'm not going to show that because I'm running out of time already. So, what else can I show you? Yeah, so this is Safari. And Safari, I showed you, has some weird things with the preferences, which is here. If you go to Preference Advanced, you have to show Develop Menu, a menu bar whenever you want to use it. But Safari has one thing that is pretty cool. So this is our tool that we have for, is this going to work? You see, yes, I see my crutch. So one thing that Safari has that all the others don't have is the console tab. Not the console tab, the Canvas tab. And with Canvas, you can record whatever is happening on your screen, not on your screen, in a Canvas element. So what we have here is we have a Canvas element which just plays a sound in the background. Maybe it's funner if you do this because this is the microphone, then you can just see me talk. So if you record the canvas that we use, which now is Canvas 4, it records all the frames that was in the canvas, and then you can see for each frame whatever was called and what then the current state of that canvas was during that frame. So here you can see that I do canvas.width, move to 0, and canvas.height, line to, stuff like that. And with this, I realized that I'm calling canvas.height every time, and I still need to fix that. But I didn't fix it, so I could show you how you can then see whatever is going wrong with your code. So if I remove this, okay. If I remove this, if I use this, I can see that this canvas.height is calling too many times, and I can just do this once, and then it would probably improve the performance, especially on mobile. So I have 4 minutes left. What can I show you? There is the Chrome. Yes, so Chrome has in the network tab where you can see whatever is being called, like all the stuff that's being called here, being loaded. What Chrome has, what the others don't have, is you can easily capture screenshots. That's at least Firefox can do it, but it's a little bit harder. So you just start that, and it says fetching frames, and it's not doing anything, because why would it be doing anything? Ah, there it is. So you can easily see the each step that how the browser shows how the browser, what the window looks like in that time frame. If you do offline, no, not offline, disable cache, then you can just see it a little bit better. Why is it not recording anything? Ah, there it is. So here you can see that the fonts are not loaded yet. And then at this time frame, which is at 1.18 seconds, the font is being loaded. So then you can figure out, like, can I make this better? Maybe I can use a different fallback font or something like that. You can then check it exactly. Well, not anymore. Okay, let me just go to the next thing. So basically what I'm trying to say is that Firefox is great for HTML, CSS stuff. I use Chrome a lot for basically all the JavaScript debugging that I do. And I start out with performance debugging in Chrome as well, because their performance tools are a little bit better, in my opinion, than Firefox or Safari has. Because it has a little bit more threads and stuff like that. You can easily see what's going on. And I use Safari for nothing except for Canvas. Safari is not that good with debugging. Well, it's okay, but it doesn't have that much unique features. It has some, but they're not that, you wouldn't write home about it. Let me just say it like that. And then I hope that Edge will come with some cool stuff, and because like they have their amazing developers now, and they have more resources right now to work on the dev tools, because they are now using Chromium, so they don't have to put their resources on the rendering engine anymore. So in the end, I think what is really important is to just master your favorite dev tools. If you have one Chrome browser that you work on a lot, just try to master that, and try to use all the tabs that are there for the purposes they have. But for the complex jobs, try to use the right tools. So use Firefox if you really want to figure out what's going on in Flexbox, and don't try to do it in Chrome, because that's just going to hurt yourself. And that was it. Thank you.